Hey everybody, this is your host Max again, and I'm excited to go over the step 5 prioritization and basically the final step of the road mapping process. And this is really the most exciting. This is where everything really comes together and you have your finalized roadmap in the very end. So, from the previous lesson, we went through and created themes. We've grouped all these inputs into different themes and defined those themes by around a problem statement or a need, and outlined who that would be impacting and the business metrics that would impact specifically. Um, so the first part of prioritization, and there's a lot of different ways in which you can prioritize. This is not the way that you have to do it. If you have a different way of doing it at your company, certainly I encourage that. But this is a method in which I've used in the past that I think works well. And so basically, the first step with this process is identifying the key criteria and the weight that you want to prioritize the themes by, right? And so this may be, customer value. How much does this provide value to the customer? Business value. How much value to the business is it providing? The effort that's involved. So this might be maybe like a estimation on the time and the cost that will be required to carry out some of the themes or parts of the theme that have been kind of considered. The users that are going to be impacted, is this going to be a subset of your customer base, or is this going to impact all of the customers, or even more than just your customers? Maybe it's going to impact your team members as well. So you can kind of measure it based upon that. And then also alignment with company strategy is a popular one. This may be closely tied to the business value, so you might just group those together. But really, what you want to do is, as a team in a workshop, identify, just take a few minutes and jot down as many criteria that you guys think are going to be valuable. And then what you can do is also vote on what you think is going to be the most valuable. And that may contribute to how much weight is going to be assigned to them, right? And so if everybody agrees, yeah, business value, alignment with company strategy, that's going to be the most important determining factor in what we work on. Let's maybe weigh that a little bit heavily or more heavily compared to the effort or number of users that are impacted, right? So um, you want to vote on that. Maybe you'll get a rundown of what that breakdown is. And so you'll have this here, which is the framework for actually rating the themes. So we've identified business value. That was the most important. Maybe we give that a 1.5 rating or weighting. Then we've got the user value. That's equally as important. Maybe depending on your company and how customer centric you are. So maybe that's got a similar weighting. The users impacted, maybe a little bit less. We'll weight that at a 1. And then effort, time, and cost, still really important, but maybe not as important as the business and user value. So you give it maybe a 1.25, right? And maybe you want to move these around just so it's in order of most important to least important. So that's kind of what the framework is doing. And then what you'll see here at the top is each column is the different theme. So what you'll do is, again, copy over, and I don't recommend dragging these over. You want to kind of show the progress that you've made over time throughout this process. So what I typically do is just copy and paste these over, and then you'll drag and drop them into these new columns. And then you can always add more, right? Typically, you might have as many as 10 themes that you have after all of this process. So this is just a simpler version, just to give you an example. So for this first one, you'll go back through as a team and you'll say, all right, account linking, right? The main problem to be solved, or the need, is that customers need to be able to easily monitor all their money across multiple accounts and banks in order to have a clear transparency of their financial wellness. All right, so then you'll discuss as a team, how much does this impact, like how much business value does this theme provide? And typically, the key stakeholders that you want to be able to have answer this is likely your product manager, or someone else from the business side that can provide that insight. And let's say they say, hey, this is really important to the business. This aligns perfectly with what the business's goals are, what we're trying to accomplish. So you want to give that a higher rating. And so what I do is I've got a score from 0, 1, or 2. 0 is basically a bad score. It doesn't have any value. or it maybe costs a lot or something like that. So you'll have a lower score there. And then if it's kind of like partial, like, yeah, it touches on some of the business value, but not fully, you can give that a 1. And then if it's perfectly aligned, sounds good, everything's great, you can give that a 2. And again, it doesn't have to be concrete. It can be a 1.5 if it's kind of in between scores. You don't even have to use a 0, 1, and 2. I've seen other people use scores like a 1, 3, and a 9, which kind of already uh, integrates some of that weighting into it. Um, 1 or 0, 1, and 2 is simple enough. So that's the one that I use. So let's say yes, this perfectly aligns with the company strategy, and the business value would be a 2. So let's give that rating there. And then the user value, typically you want your UX folks, whether it's the research team and or design team, to provide some insight into the user value. So for this one, we had a lot of user research that went into outlining, hey, uh, customers are asking for this. This is something that's going to help them accomplish their personal financial goals. So yes, this would provide considerable user value. So let's give that one a 2 as well. And then effort. Okay, well, we don't have to spin up anything entirely new. We can integrate potentially with a partner like Plaid. However, there is still quite a bit of lift here, and it's going to take some time. So maybe let's give that one a rating of 1, right? Because it takes a bit of effort, but not too much effort. So it's kind of in the middle. And then the users impacted and reach, right? This would impact everyone. Let's make sure that we include. Um, we'll give that a 2, right? That impacts all of our customers. Um, Great. And so then we'll move on. And again, time is value with all your stakeholders. You want to get through these as quickly as possible while you have time with them. And you can always calculate the scores at the very end. You also don't want the scores to necessarily influence everyone's weighting and perspective here. So you don't want to show that, hey, this score is going to be less than the previous one that we wanted, but maybe some people feel strongly about it, so then they start rating things higher than they normally would, right? So just be careful with that. Let's say this account enrollment one maybe had a little bit lower score, user value would still be a 2. The effort, um, very considerably difficult to do. Let's give it a 0.5. And then the users impacted and reached, basically all new enrollment. Maybe we'll just give that a 1, right? So just giving you an example quickly here. Course engagement, again, maybe that only impacts those that sign up for the course when they are part of the thing, which is a subset of users. Maybe it's a smaller size. Company strategy, maybe that's highly important, but not the most important. User value, they get a lot of user value out of that, but maybe again not as much as some other things, and the effort's pretty high, so we'll give that a 1. So again, effort's probably the one that you have to keep in mind, as it might be a lot more work, so that would actually be a lower score, right? So be careful of that, because what you're going to be doing is calculating the total raw score at the end. And so here you'll have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'll give that a 7. Then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4.5. And then we've got a 3, 4.5 here. Ooh, okay, so we've got kind of 2 that are the same score now. Well, how do we prioritize one over the other if they're weighted the same? So what you'll do next is, this is where the weighting comes in, especially for any scores that turn out to be the same. You'll go through and calculate, okay, well, let's take this score and multiply it by the weighting. So we've got a 1.5 here, and I don't know 1.5 times 1.5 is, but essentially you'll go through and calculate all of these scores, and what you might end up finding is, hey, now that these have been weighted, maybe we've got like a 6.25 on this one, and this one's 5.75, right? And so now we've got, because of the weighting, a better understanding that due to how important we value certain criteria, this theme is more important than this other one. And so now you've officially, identified the criteria, rated the themes based upon importance of these different criteria here. And what you'll do next is what I like to do is actually add the scores. And actually, what you'll have here is 4.5 just to show the original score, and then I put everything that's weighted in parentheses here. So um, just for transparency. All right, and then what we'll do is we'll add the scores up here. And again, I forgot to add this one here. Let's just say this was like a 8.75 just to keep things simple. All right, so then let's say we've got this here. What I like to do is add a tag. Here we go. And I just put in the score that we're going to be using. So let's say we're going to be using the weighted scores here. I'm going to add an 8.75, and let's make this a gray color. And so I'm going to actually be adding the weightings as tags just for, again, transparency here. 6.25. Just because it makes it easier to reference later. 5.75. Awesome. So now we've got all three of our themes. We've got the objective that it's pertaining to, right? We've got this one on transparency, this one on reducing mistakes, this one on improving financial literacy, and we've got the priority score here. And so next we're going to again copy all of these over. And as a team, you'll then go through and say, cool, what are we going to work on first? What are we going to work on next? And what are we going to work on in the future? And this is where, again, if you've got, you'll likely have more than just 3 themes. If you have only 3, that makes it simple. You can work on more than one potentially at a time. But just for this example, we're going to say, hey, we're going to work on account linking now because that's obviously the highest priority. And then we're going to look at account enrollment because that had the next highest priority score. And then maybe in the future, we'll consider looking at improving course engagement, right? And so if you've got maybe a 9 or 10 different themes here, you might have a few projects that you're working on now, a few projects that you'll consider pulling in once some of these are wrapped up. And then some that you might consider long term further down the road after these other more important themes have been completed. And so what you'll see here too is we've got different rows here. What you can also do is just split it up by objective. So if you've got a bunch of different themes, you can say, hey, everything in the top row is our objective on transparency. This one's our objective on reducing mistakes. This one's our objective on financial literacy. And that way you can see, hey, are we working on a theme that touches on each objective at the moment, right? So you might consider having all of these themes in the now column if you've got other ones. To say that yes, your team is working on all 3 of these objectives at the moment, and this is the priority score. And then once these are complete, or you kind of hit a stall there, you can move over some other columns or other themes. So anyway, that is how you do the prioritization of the roadmap and how you create your finalized roadmap into a now, next, and later framework. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to go over this with me, and hopefully that this is a useful tool for you in creating your themes in the future. There's also this final output that you can use that outlines everything together, so you can put in your vision statement at the top here, your key objectives, your results or metrics that you want to track that impact the objectives, your themes based upon now, next, and later, and then the key beneficiaries of the work that you're going to be doing, and the key stakeholders and teams that will be impacted and involved in the work. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to take this course, and I hope you learned something and look forward to teaching you again in a future course. Thank you. Bye.